How could anyone ever tell you you're anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you're less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you're anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you're less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. You hold the essence of love, the very substance you're made of, the stuff that holds the stars in space and makes the sun shine through your face. You are a wonder. Anyone can see who you are. There is no other soul can ever take your place. Let me please. How could anyone ever tell you you're anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you're less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you're anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you're less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. Inside your heart is a light, burning with joy and delight. There is no ocean or wind can quench that warm flame within. Let it pour through you, lighting every corner of the sky. Release your fears, and on the wings of love you'll fly. Sing. How could anyone ever tell you you're anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you're less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you're anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you're less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How deeply you're connected to my soul.
Today's word is forgive. The affirmation is, I release any resentments, fears, or judgments I may hold. As long as my infinite spirit continues in this human experience, resentments, fears, and negative judgments will be a part of the journey. By dissolving these negative reactions to the world and replacing them with the healing power of infinite love, I discovered my spiritual purpose. The key to that purpose is forgiveness, allowing myself to see from the perspective of spirit, free from the illusions of this mortal world. From that perspective, I see only love expanding every day in greater expression. Today I joyfully release any resentments, fears, or negative judgments I may hold concerning others, and particularly myself. And from the book of Mark, chapter 11, verse 25, whenever you stand praying, forgive if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father in heaven may also forgive you your trespasses.
Thank you. I used to work in an orange juice factory, but I quit. I just couldn't concentrate. I asked Alexa this morning for a joke, and that's what I got. You know? Someday, so I'm only as good as the material you send me. So, I'm asking inanimate objects now for jokes. That's not a good sign necessarily, But, well, as I started to talk a little bit about last week, I had just been to the Unity Convention, which is the international convention that was held in San Antonio, Texas. And it was incredibly powerful. I was there with 425 ministers, board members of Unities all over the world. And I just wanted to let you know, because we don't talk about this often, here is the official Unity vision as it was adopted by their board and then hence trickles down. This is the vision. A world powerfully transformed through the growing movement of shared spiritual awakening. Can we get behind that one? A world powerfully transformed through the growing movement of shared spiritual awakening. And their mission is advancing the movement of spiritual awakening and transformation through unity, a positive path for spiritual living. I love that. And at the Unity Convention, now I should tell you, the theme was Keep Unity Wide Open, Freed by Truth, Moving with Spirit. And we had a number of wonderful keynote speakers, but I think probably in Unity would you have, Reverend Paul Smith, who's a retired Baptist minister, was one of our keynotes. Father Gregory Boyle, who's a Jesuit priest. And then Sharif Abdallah, who I'm guessing is not Lutheran. I'm not sure what he was, but he can kind of, I'm guessing anyway. And those were some of our keynotes, and they were incredible because we know that when we look at the core of whatever our religious traditions are, they're the same. And so I wanted to share today some of the message that Father Gregory Boyle shared. And if you're not familiar with who he is actually the founder and CEO of Homeboy Industries. LA. And Homeboy Industries, Homeboy is a community of kinship in which those seeking to leave gang life can find hope and receive support to redefine their lives. Powerful mission, isn't it? And they're the largest gang intervention, rehabilitation, and reentry program in the world. They have on average 15,000 gang members who go through their doors each year. And if you're like me, quite honestly, I don't have a close, relationship. I didn't grow up where there were gangs. I grew up in St. Louis Park, down in Minneapolis.
Forget the Baldies.
Well, yeah, but you ate with them at the drive-in. It wasn't really a scary thing. But she's from St. Louis Park, she knows. But anyway, so I didn't grow up with gangs. And but I know that for many people, it's a very different experience. We have a daughter-in-law who grew up in East LA. The gang experience is close to home there. It's a very different felt experience. And so when he was telling me these numbers, it was hard for me to even imagine. I'm going, 15,000 a year, aren't you running out? And unfortunately, they aren't. And he said something incredibly powerful. And he said, nobody has ever met a hopeful kid who joined a gang. Isn't that true? Nobody's ever met a hopeful kid who joined a gang. And he said, joining a gang is the equivalent of choosing to commit suicide. That's how hopeless you are. That is the only alternative you see. and how people can get there. And, some of us have maybe felt that down and out where suicide was an option. And for these young people who are going into the gangs, that appears to be the only option for them. And then this wonderful community is being built of kinship. And they provide legal consultation. They do mental health, substance abuse work. They have lots of classes everywhere from anger management to baby and me, to beginning computer classes, to domestic violence classes. They have a class now on solar panel training where they're going to teach their members to install solar panels. Brilliant. They have NAAAGA. They have all kinds of support for their people. And of course and it is a program where the people have to want it. They don't go out and try and recruit people from the gangs. The people come to their door and want to come in. And that's how they show up. They are ready. And he says, our goal is to help former gang members discover and inhabit their true selves. Does that sound familiar? Isn't that kind of what we talk about every Sunday? How we discover the truth of who we are and inhabit fully that divine expression? And that's the same mission that they have out in that community. So I was thinking about that. And of course, they have bakeries now. They've got a Homeboy Diner. They got Homegirl Cafe. They have Homeboy Salsa. And they sell all kinds of merchandise at 30 different markets in the LA area. They just said they tried everything. They have embroidery. They've got all kinds of things. They tried Homeboy Plumbing. It did not go well. Because since Homeboy Industry, 85% of the people in it are on parole or probation, people really didn't want them in their homes. So they decided, okay, that was probably not the really, he says that's, but they try things and then see if they work and continue to grow. And he says, what we want to do is have a day when we stop thinking that we can throw anybody away. Isn't that powerful? And so I was thinking, and this is nothing new. We've been instructed and invited to do this for so long. I look back at Leviticus, so we're going back a ways. It says, if one of your countrymen becomes poor and sells some of his property, his nearest relative is to come and redeem what his countryman has sold. If one of your countrymen becomes poor and is unable to support himself among you, help him as you would an alien or a temporary resident, so he can continue to live among you. If one of your countrymen becomes poor among you and sells himself to you, do not make him work as a slave. And then we go on, and in Deuteronomy it says, do not take advantage of a hired man who is poor and needy, whether he's a brother Israelite or an alien living in one of your towns. And it made me think about, some of you who get the newspaper, there was an article about a week ago about, it was talking about the difficulty for many people in our country, even the working. And it was talking about a truck driver who, by the time he made his payment on his truck, the insurance on his truck, and everything, and gas, he was making 69 cents a week. He was sleeping in his truck and working about 20 hours a day. There's something kitty-wampus about that, isn't there? Because I'm thinking there are so many people involved in that to help out. There's so many places where we as individuals, I may not start another Homegirl Industries, but there's some place where we may show up to intervene somewhere. And maybe it was the person who was writing the lease papers for that truck doing the math and going, my gosh, how much you're paid. Or the company he works for going, this math is not working. There are all kinds of places where that could come in, where we can intervene as we're being invited to, so that none of our countrymen end up out there on the margins. In Psalms it says, defend the weak and the fatherless. Uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. Father Boyle said, he says, there are so many people living on the margins of our society right now. And the only way the margins are going to be erased is if we go out to that end of the margin. We go out there. And then they become erased. It says it's not to save anybody. He says saving is for the Coast Guard. It's not about that. I like that. He said, what happens is when we go out to the margins, we save ourselves. And I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, when have I been near the margins in the last couple weeks? And, I was near on Thursday, I saw the margin through my car window when I went on the exit of the freeway in St. Paul, and the man was holding the sign. When I was down in San Antonio, I was walking the Riverwalk. And underneath the bridges were people living on the margins. And it was interesting for me to see how I responded. The first night I was there, I was asking for a shortcut to go to a certain restaurant. They had me go up on streets through a large metropolitan city that I'm not familiar with. And I went past the Greyhound bus station. And then I was going past a part where it did not, I saw people who were living on the margins, and I didn't feel safe. So I turned around and came back and ordered room service. That's kind of ironic, isn't it? But then on the days when I was walking on the Riverwalk and the people were onto the bridges, and part of that was I felt safer. So there were other people going by. So I could be in conversation with people and I could talk to them. And they all, to the person, asked me for money, which would make sense. They needed it. But it was to recognize them and to just interact with them as human beings made me feel better. Because when I drove by the man with the sign as I was leaving the freeway ramp, the reason we go to the margins, one of it is to save ourselves, because we're all one. And how do you feel when you see that person that you drive by? It doesn't make me feel good. I don't know, I imagine they feel the same way. It's a little, because they're me. We're all one. And, Jesus of Nazareth, he was so much about inclusion, about nonviolence, unconditional, loving kindness, about acceptance of everybody, whether you were a leper or the unclean, women. Oh my gosh, he included everybody. It made no difference to him. And of course, this was his invitation to us. And I'm doing the Aramaic Bible interpretation. It says, every person will know by this, that you are my disciples, if you shall have love one to the other. Everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. That's what we're invited to do. And as I listened to Father Boyle talk about his community of kinship, which are these former gang members, and he talked about one guy, and I will abbreviate, but he said he had tattooed on his forehead, F the world. He wrote it out. He had difficulty getting a job. Yeah. But that's how hopeless he felt. That message was right accurate for him. And then he said, they got that tattoo removed. Then this young man, he says, that was the dumbest thing he ever did. And he said, now is a security guard at a major movie studio, and he has no bit of anger in him, because he works with others too. He works with others in this project, and he said it was interesting. So he was not the only one in gang members who had tattoos, and probably none of the tattoos are the same things that you guys have on out here. My guess is. And they started having a 3,000 person waiting list to have tattoos removed. 3,000. And so they built up. So they are now the largest tattoo removal institution in the world. Pretty amazing. They have 30 employees. They've got doctors. They have mental health therapists, counselors, people helping. But the big part of this is so people feel better about themselves. You don't want to walk around with a message of hopelessness on your body, do you? And so they help them remove those as they then move into knowing the truth of who they are. Father Boyle showed another story. It's what happens is he travels around the country and guest speak, and he usually takes 2 former gang members with him. And he says, I always take opposing gang members with me. It's kind of my own fun, because they still really aren't really fond of each other necessarily, but they have to get on an airplane together and fly, and then they tell their story. And usually it's in smaller groups, but this time it ended up being in a large group, so the guys were a little bit uncomfortable. But so one man stood up, and he said that when he was 6 years old, I want to get this right, his mom said to him, "Why don't you just die? You're such a burden." And as you kind of had a reaction to that, the guy said, and it was even worse in Spanish. And of course, obviously, this is a clue that the mother had no skills at this point and was having her own issues. And when he was 9, his mother took him to an orphanage down in Baja, Mexico. And then for 9 months, it took 9 months for his grandmother to get his mother to tell him which orphanage he was at, so the grandma could come and rescue him. And she did. And then he continued, so then he's back in the United States, in LA. And he said, "I wore 3 t-shirts, no matter if it was 100 degrees, because I didn't want people to see the wounds on my back," because he was beat every day. Until he was 20, he wore 3 t-shirts. He said, "But now," he says, "I don't do that. I'm proud of my wounds." And Father Boyle said something really profound to me. He says, "If we don't welcome our wounds, we will despise the wounded. If we don't welcome our own fears, we're going to despise those who we think are living them out. If I have lack thinking, and I see a person who's asking for a handout, I may despise them because they are the actual living example of what my greatest fear is." We go out there to save ourselves, to find ourselves, to heal ourselves while we heal the others. He told a number of stories, and there's a homegirl cafe, and a lot of celebrities go into the homegirl cafe, and Jim Carrey goes in there all the time, and Diane Keaton went in there one day, and Maria, one of the waitstaff, went up to her and said, "Don't I know you?" And of course Diane Keaton is trying to self-deprecating, "Oh, I just have one of those faces." "No, I know you. We were in jail together, weren't we?" And she was a loud person. Yeah, Marie was loud. So the whole, yeah, right, yeah. It's good stuff. Yeah. But they're out of jail. And they're doing things that are incredibly valuable. When he was out doing this guest speaking, one of the other men told another story. And he was talking about his childhood, and he had shared things about himself. He had a son. And then it got to question and answer time, which is, a little delicate. And so one of the women in the audience asked this former gang member, "What is one thing you would want your son to learn from you?" And this former gang member, this really strong, big guy, scary looking if you don't know him, started sobbing, first silently. But he wanted to say something. And so we just waited, and they waited a little bit longer, and then he was choking down his sobs so that he could speak. And he said, "What's the one thing you want?" He said, "That my son not end up at all like me." And of course, it was silent. And then the woman said, "Excuse me, if you don't mind, I disagree with you. I hope that your son ends up exactly like you." And there wasn't a dry eye in the house, he said, at that point. She could see him. Isn't that what we're here to do for each other? We say it all the time. We say we behold the divine in you in unity. We use the word Christ. Doesn't matter what word we're using. We see who you are. And that woman in the audience saw that man, saw the truth of who he is. And that's what we get to do for each other, isn't it? When we go to the margins, it's not about doing anything heroic. It's not about doing anything big. It's about seeing each other wherever we're at. Because some of us are at our own margins and you can't even see it. But it's seeing each other and seeing the truth that we're all these divine, amazing beings. And so it is like recognizing each other. And we may get it wrong, and I may say, yeah, I saw you in jail. You know, it's okay. It doesn't matter. But I behold the truth of who you are. We say it here. We appreciate you just the way you are. And this program changes 15,000 lives every year. We don't even know whose lives we impact, do we? By being present, by being that divine expression, so that we can behold and see it in somebody else. But that's our invitation. That's what Jesus of Nazareth invited us to do. Through all times, all the sages have always told us that everyone is our brother and our sister. And we even say we're all one. And so if one is suffering, then we all are. And so we have this opportunity. We don't have to figure out how to solve it. Someone asked Father, I said, how are you going to solve this problem? He goes, I don't know. We get concerned about all that big lofty stuff. We may lose what we can do right this moment, which is being the divine expression that we are and seeing it in everybody else. So, all you homeboys and homegirls, I behold the divine in you. And so
All right.
it is.
All right.
And I just invite you to get comfortable in your seats. Let the floor and the chair support you completely. And if you haven't done so already, I invite you to gently close your eyes. Know that you may choose to follow my words, or you may choose to go elsewhere. Wherever you go will be perfect. Each Sunday we close our service by singing the peace song. And its words are truly an affirmation. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. I know that within me the breath of peace flows in and through me, out into the world. Jesus was not born into a peaceful world, but rather he brought his peace. And the peace of Spirit, God, the universe is within us, waiting upon invitation to flow. So as an expression of the divine, I need not wait for the world around me to be peaceful before opening my heart and birthing the peace of the universe in me. Our song goes on to say, let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Harmony is our naturalness. We were created in the image of the divine. Peace, not conflict, is who we truly are. Deep within my heart, I know that I was born to love and express compassion. And I know that conflict and hostility are actually unnatural. Jesus said, every person will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. We are invited to defend the weak and the fatherless and uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. We are invited to go to the margins to truly connect with those living there. Whether that means the poor, the lonely, the hopeless, the mentally ill, the addicted, the physically challenged. For as we see the divinity in those at the margins, we will come to see it more clearly in ourselves. Let peace begin with me, for I am peace. The breath of peace flows in and through me. And I share that peace by loving all those around me. And as love ripples from me into the world, more people than I can possibly imagine are affected. So let the rain come and wash away the ancient grudges, the bitter hatreds held and nurtured over generations. Let the rain wash away the memory of the hurt, the neglect. Then let the sun come out and fill the sky with rainbows. Let the warmth of the sun heal us wherever we are broken. Let it burn away the fog so that we can see each other clearly. So that we can see beyond labels, accents, gender, or skin color. Let the warmth and brightness of the sun melt away any selfishness, so that we can share the joys and feel the sorrows of our neighbors. And let the light of the sun be so strong that we see all people as our neighbors. Peace I am, peace I give, peace I shall be, peace unto you, and peace unto me. And so it is.
Amen.
And I invite you to take a few gentle breaths. And as we prepare to leave the sacred stillness of prayer, your senses can slowly awaken to your surroundings and to all the changes that have already taken place within our hearts. So it is. And if you want to do a little gentle stretch like your wise pets do, please feel free to do that. Do watch out for your neighbor. All right.
This song, and again, you hopefully have some lyrics in your bulletin. It's called Up the, well, it was originally called Up the One-Year Live, the Stephen Slow song, and I think it was originally written more as a song to support casual affection. So I added an S to it. That's the one Jim has consulted to give us some rhythmic support. But I wonder who else of you would like to give us some rhythm. Yes. If I can, I'll try to sing that first chorus twice so you have a chance to practice. If you're down and confused, you don't remember who you're talking to. Concentration slip away, cause your loved ones are so far away. There's a rose in the biscuit glove, and the eagle flies with the dove, and it can be the ones you love. crying over good times you had. There's somebody next to you, they're just waiting for something to do. Here we go. There's a rose in the misted cloud, and the eagle flies with the dove. And if you can't be the ones you love, love the ones you're with, love the ones you're with, love the ones you're with. Turn your heart in and get joy. Every girl and every boy got to get together, make it nice. You ain't gonna need any more than that. There's a rose in the distant cloud, and the eagle flies with the dove. If you can't be with the ones you love, love the ones you live, love the ones you live, love the ones you live. One more. Love the ones you live.
Thank you.